Hello everyone, thank you so much again for your ongoing support here on Patreon. I hope that you're enjoying all of the extra bonus content exclusively for Patreon members, and I hope that you're also enjoying all the content over on YouTube. Today I'm going to be doing the director's ranked video where everyone voted on a poll and the winner was Martin Scorsese. No surprise there. So I've already done, again, he's one of these directors, he's done a number of films, so to go through every single film and ranking them would take a considerable amount of time. I have done a video which ranks his movies from the 1970s, and I'll leave that in the description box below if you want to have a look. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a decade, and I'm going to go with the 80s, mainly because the films in the 1980s Scorsese did are talked about, with the exception of Raging Bull, less so than films that he did in the 70s and the 90s and even in the last 20 years. So I think I'm gonna start with the 80s this time around, and if we do Scorsese again, I'll make sure to put in brackets that it will be for the 90s or the 2000s, the 2010s, so we can be much more specific. So with that being said, going forward, Martin Scorsese made 5 films in the 1980s. Raging Bull, The King of Comedy, After Hours, Color of Money, and The Last Temptation of Christ. He also made Life Lessons, which is part of New York Stories, which was a trilogy of 3 films that were all combined into one feature film. The other 2 one was directed by Woody Allen and one was directed by Francis Ford Coppola. I like all those films so much. I would say my least favorite, if I have to really pick, would be After Hours, even though I think it's extraordinary. Griffin Dunne, the whole film is him just trying to get home, and it's extremely funny. The script was written by a film student, and they were going to do it with Tim Burton, Griffin Dunne, and Amy Robinson, who was in Mean Streets. They were going to produce it and to have it directed by Tim Burton, and Scorsese got a hold of it and said he wanted to do it, and Tim Burton said, well, if Scorsese wants to do this, I'm not going to get in Scorsese's way. So Scorsese took over, and it's dark and moody, but done really as a dark comedy. It has a lot of great performances, and Griffin Dunne I thought was incredible, but certainly has that signature Scorsese style, New York, nighttime, the grittiness, but certainly a dark sense of humor. So I would say that's my least favorite, but again, it's an extraordinary film. After that, I would have to go with Life Lessons, even though again it's not a feature film. It's part of a feature film, but I suppose it counts. But it's really, really good. Nick Nolte and Rosanna Arquette, and Nick Nolte is this painter, this artist, and he's in love with Rosanna Arquette, who's his assistant, but she doesn't love him back. And it's this roller coaster ride of this, relationship that they have with each other. And she eventually storms out, and he's left with meeting another woman at the end of the film. It was actually based on a true story, but it's really, really, really good. Again, just Scorsese's signature styles, his use of music and slow motion and editing, and it's in your face. And again, like I said, really Nick Nolte and Rosanna Arquette are really, really good in it. After that, I'd have to go with tough one, probably Color of Money. Even though, I would say Color of Money, great film. You got Paul Newman, Tom Cruise, and it's a sequel to The Hustler, where Fast Eddie Felson, we saw in The Hustler, he left, the pool hall, never to return, as the thugs and gangsters, that was the deal, don't come back. So Paul Newman said he was always wondering what happened to that guy out of all the characters he played. So here he is, and now he's a guy basically, hustling, but being the manager of hustlers. And he meets Tom Cruise, and he thinks Tom Cruise is the best player since him, I suppose. And they go on a wild tour, and what happens really is it's more about Fast Eddie trying to get back to who he really is, that he compromised himself, and who he really is as a great pool player. And it's really good, and I think it's it's really about getting lost and rediscovering yourself. So highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. After that, Last Temptation of Christ, great film, Willem Dafoe. This was supposed to be made in 1983, but there was, because it was controversial to see, Jesus Christ have sex with a woman in it and get married and have children. And, this was based on a novel which was looking at Jesus as a human as opposed to, being portrayed as someone who was purely almost as if he wasn't human, the Son of God and divine and open the gates of heaven and stuff like that. But here you see him much more doubting himself, doubting that he's a son of God. He's has more flaws. He's conflicted, and he's imagining what it would be like if he didn't die on the cross, if he had denied what God wanted and had a family and had children, and so this was extremely controversial. You can imagine at the time amongst Christians and Catholics, and there were a lot of protests to not get the film made. So the film was put in. It was canceled by the studio, and then 3 or 4 years later he got it made, Scorsese, and it's just a really. I mean, Willem Dafoe is incredible. Harvey Keitel's in it, Barbara Hershey. And it's very different than any of the other films you see on Jesus, where they basically are telling the story of the Bible, or in the case of the Passion of the Christ, where it's just the last 12 hours of his life before he dies. But it's a really interesting portrayal of, looking at everything Jesus went through that's written in the Bible, taking it further, and that if he's a man, he must have had more temptations. He must have had more flaws. He couldn't have been as perfect as he's portrayed. So I think it's a great film. And if you haven't seen it, I highly, highly recommend. After that, of course, King of Comedy, brilliant. Robert De Niro as Rupert Pumpkin, Jerry Lewis. It's just a phenomenal, really funny film. Scorsese said he almost had difficulty doing it because he just thought it was so embarrassing. Just the lengths this guy goes to get seen and to be famous, and he's in love with the illusions of fame, and he's self-delusional about himself, and he's almost insane, in kidnapping Jerry Lewis just so that they'll put him on Jerry Lewis's show, even though they told him that his stand-up wasn't that good. It just really speaks to the American dream, I suppose, and people's ambitions going way, 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 way too far, and being, just delusional and sort of, America. The irony is that he was awarded in the end for kid, just because it made a good story, writes a book and all that kind of stuff. You don't really know whether that's in his head or not. It's kind of up to the audience, but it's a really great film that I've seen many times. I can see time and time again, but it's something in Scorsese's filmography. It's certainly talked about, but it's talked about much less than, Goodfellas or Mean Streets or Raging Bull and Casino and movies like that, The Departed. But it's really up there with one of Scorsese's best, and certainly De Niro's performance as Rupert Pumpkin is fantastic. So after that, of course, number one, how can you not pick? I know it's cliche, but Raging Bull, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci. We reviewed it on the channel. I should say I reviewed. I'm saying we because my former co-host, as you all know, Steve Chambers, and I did it together as part of a double bill with Cape Fear, just really a tale of morals, a tale of someone who's self-destructive, whose life has been violent. He's a boxer and doing too many bad things that he doesn't know how to come back from it. But in the end, he knows he at least has to get better, and he has to. That's the ultimate redemption, is at least knowing that you have to change. So it's a tough film to watch. There's a lot of there's physical violence against women. There's a lot of atrocious verbal abuse, relationships being torn apart, and it's rough. But an incredible film. Of course, by the end of the 80s, it was named the best film of the 1980s. And at the time when it came out, it got some Oscar nominations. Robert De Niro won an Academy Award, but it didn't do that well. It was something that years later people started to say, wow, this is maybe one of the best films ever. And I think it really is. And I think it's the best thing Scorsese ever made. So there you have it, folks. That is director's ranked video for June. Martin Scorsese in the 80s. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I will see you all very, very soon. Take care.